Hello lads, so we're going to have a look today at the basics of complex numbers. Okay, so let's go through what a complex number is. A complex number contains a real bit and an imaginary bit. So there's the real, it's a real number, and this is what's called an imaginary, although that name has kind of gone into a bit of, it's been defunct, imaginary number. Now, what do we mean by an imaginary number? Well, an imaginary number is a number that's used to express the square root of a minus number. So, for example, the square root of minus 1 is denoted as I. So, that really means 2 times the square root of minus 1. And that's not something that a calculator can do. But complex numbers allow you to work around that problem. So if I put square root of minus 1 into a calculator, square root of minus 1, square root of minus 1, again an error. So that's our problem. This is our solution. Okay? So there's a couple of rules regarding them. The first rule is that you can only add the real bits of a complex number to the real bits of another complex number. The second rule is you can only add the imaginary bits to the imaginary bits, and that goes for subtraction as well. And the third and most important rule, and really the only one you need to remember, is that when you multiply two imaginary numbers. So I'm going to show you the 3 rules in action. So I'm going to give myself 3 complex numbers. This is the first one, 2 plus 3i. This is the second one. Let's call it 3 minus 5i. And let's pick a third one then. Minus 3 minus 2i. Okay? So there's 3 complex numbers. Now, I'm going to add them. So I'm going to add the first one and the second one. Let's see what happens. 2 plus 3i plus, I'm going to use a bracket just in case, 3 minus 5i. In case I need to put a number in front of there, but I don't. So let's add them. I'm going to add the real bits together, 2 plus 3, that's 5. And now I'm going to add the imaginaries. So 3i minus 5i. So when I'm adding or subtracting imaginary bits, I treat them as if they are just numbers. 3 take away 5 is minus 2, and I leave the I. And that's what happens when you add them. Now I'm going to subtract them. Z3 minus twice Z1. So let's see what happens here. What's Z3? Z3 is minus 3 minus 2i minus twice Z1, 2 plus 3i. So I see a bracket here, so that has to be done first. So that's minus 3 minus 2i. Minus 2 times 2 is minus 4. And minus 2 times 3i, that's okay, that's just minus 6i. And now I just use my rule. I add what I can add. Add the reals. Minus 3 minus 4 is minus 7. And add the imaginaries. Minus 2 minus 6 is minus 8i. So that's how you do subtraction. And you notice when you multiply by a number, just a real number, it just does what a normal number does when you multiply it. Now, this is where it's fun. I'm going to multiply 2 of them together. Z1 multiplied by Z3. So I'm going to use brackets to help me. And I do this the 2 different ways. I'd use the grid method and the old-fashioned method. Okay, so here I go. I'm going to multiply it using the old-fashioned method. Remember, the old-fashioned method is just multiply that by that, multiply that by that, multiply that by that, multiply that by that. Okay, and at the same time, I'm going to do the grid method over here. Remember, the grid method is just take one of them and put it on the top, take the other one and put it on the side, and you're going to fill it by multiplying each row by column. Okay, so I'll do the 2 methods. So in this method, 2 times minus 3 is minus 6. 2 times minus 2i is minus 4i. 3 times minus 3 is minus 9i. And now here it comes. 3i times minus 2i. So you have to separate this out. You multiply the 3 by the minus 2, you get minus 6. Now, I squared is equal to minus 1. That's what happens. So if that's minus 1, then you actually just change the sign. You don't add a 1, take away a 1, you just change the sign of whatever happened when you multiplied. So now let's just tidy this up. Minus 6 plus 6 is 0. Minus 4 minus 9 is minus 13i. Now let's see, do get the same answer if we use the grid. Minus 3 times 2 is minus 6. Minus 3 times 3 is minus 9i. 2 times minus 2 is minus 4i. And minus 2 times plus 3 is minus 6. I squared is minus 1, so that changes to a plus. They cancel and you're left with 0 minus 13i. Okay, so that's the basics of this. That's your basics: add, subtract, multiply. Okay, so next I'm going to show you divide. So the cool thing about dividing is just multiplication. So I'm going to show you how to divide. And I'll show it to you on a couple of different ones. So I'm going to stick a nice one to start with. 4 minus 3i divided by 3 plus 2i. So I'm going to divide those two. So if you follow this step, it should make sense. Multiply them both, top and bottom, by what's called the conjugate. And what a conjugate is you take any real and imaginary bit, any complex number, and you just change the sign between them. They're conjugates of each other. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the top and bottom of this fraction by the conjugate of the bottom. So I've just changed the middle. Okay, now I still have to multiply, but that's all I have to do now. Now I'm going to show you a trick to make the bottom very easy. In order to work out the bottom very quickly, all you do is take your calculator, take the first number, not the sign, whether that's plus or minus, I don't care. You just take the number 3 and you square it, and then you press plus, and you take the second number 2 and square it. No, I'm not, whether it's plus or minus, it doesn't matter, it's always going to be plus. And 13 is my answer. That's that bit done. Now we have to multiply out the top. So we have 4 minus 3i, 3 minus 2i. So we're going to have to multiply the top out the same way as we did this, either using the old-fashioned line method or using the grid method. So I'm going to use the grid method on it. So let's just do the grid method here very quickly, and then we can tidy it up. 4 minus 3i and 3 minus 2i. 3 4s are 12. 3 3s are 9 minus 9i, 4 2s are minus 8i, and 2 3s, minus 2 times minus 3 is plus 6, but because it's 2 i's, it stays as minus 6. So now let's just add. So let's see what we're going to get over 13. We're going to get 12 minus 6, which is 6, and we're going to get minus 8 minus 9 is minus 17i, and there's your answer. Or you can split the answer up into a real bit and an imaginary bit. Okay? So I'm going to try another one of these for you. I'm going to flip it around and try another one. So let me pick another one here. 3 over 6 minus 1i. So step 1, multiply top and bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. So the conjugate of that is just change the sign in the middle. 6 plus I, 6 plus I. Now, let's do our quick trick to get the bottom of the fraction. I'm going to take the 6 and square it, and then I'm going to add it to take the 1 and square it, and you get 37. That's done. Okay? Now, let's multiply the top. That's going to be 3 times 6 plus 1i. This is an easier one to do. 3 times 6 is 18, plus 3i over 37. Or 18 over 37 plus 3 over 37i. You can do it either way. Okay? So that's how you do all the basics: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Okay, so remember with divide, the only trick is you have to multiply top and bottom by a conjugate. So you just change the middle sign, and to multiply out the bottom, use my trick with the calculator.